The courtroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Every seat in the gallery was filled as journalists, attorneys, and concerned citizens whispered among themselves. It was a trial like no other, a case that had gripped the nation and ignited heated debates about religious freedom, the law, and the very foundation of justice in America. At the center of it all stood Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida, known for her fierce dedication to the law and unwavering faith. But today, she was not a prosecutor, she was the accused. The judge, Honorable Malcolm Grayson, was known for his no-nonsense approach to law. A man of principle, he held the belief that the courtroom was a sacred space for justice, not personal beliefs. And today he was about to make a ruling that would send shockwaves across the country. The case had begun as a high-profile corruption trial against a prominent business mogul, Nathan Hollis, accused of embezzling millions from government contracts. Pam Bondi, serving as a legal consultant for the prosecution, had been delivering a powerful argument when something unexpected happened. As she concluded her speech, she bowed her head, closed her eyes, and whispered a prayer. It lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough. Judge Grayson's gavel slammed down, echoing through the courtroom. Ms. Bondi approached the bench immediately. A murmur spread through the crowd. Bondi, calm and composed, stepped forward. "Your Honor," she asked, her voice steady. "Did you just pray in my courtroom?" Bondi didn't hesitate. "Yes, Your Honor." I offered a silent prayer. The judge's expression darkened. "This is a courtroom, not a church. You are here as a legal professional, not a religious figure. You know the rules, Ms. Bondi." She met his gaze firmly. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I didn't disrupt proceedings. I was simply asking for guidance, something I've done throughout my career." Judge Grayson leaned back, his fingers tapping against the bench. "You leave your beliefs at the door, Ms. Bondi. This is a secular institution. I am holding you in contempt." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. "Contempt of court? For praying?" The judge continued. "I am imposing a fine of $10,000. Payable immediately." The courtroom erupted. Bondi's attorneys protested, the media scrambled to take notes, and spectators exchanged incredulous looks. Even Nathan Hollis, the man on trial, seemed taken aback. Pam Bondi, however, remained unmoved. She turned to the jury, her eyes steady. "Your Honor," she said, "I intend to fight this." And with that, the stage was set for one of the most controversial legal battles in modern history. Pam Bondi's decision to fight the contempt charge sent shockwaves across the country. News outlets from CNN to Fox News ran headline after headline. Former Florida Attorney General fined for praying in court. Is this religious persecution? Pam Bondi defies judge's order, sparks national debate on faith and law. Freedom of religion or contempt of court? The legal battle begins. Within hours, social media erupted. On one side, civil rights groups and legal scholars debated whether Judge Malcolm Grayson had overstepped his authority. On the other, critics argued that Bondi had knowingly defied the decorum of the courtroom, claiming that her actions blurred the lines between personal faith and professional duty. Protests broke out in major cities. Some held signs reading "Faith has no place in court," while others carried banners proclaiming "Let us pray." The debate had moved beyond Bondi herself. It was now a national struggle over the interpretation of the First Amendment. Inside the courtroom, Bondi's legal team fights back. Despite the media frenzy outside, Bondi was focused on what mattered most, her legal defense. She and her attorney, Jonathan Reeves, a renowned constitutional lawyer, filed a motion to overturn the contempt ruling on the grounds that her silent prayer was a protected act under the First Amendment. The motion read, "The defendant's quiet and personal act of prayer did not disrupt court proceedings, influence the jury, or obstruct justice. To penalize her for an act of private faith is a violation of her religious freedoms as guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution." Judge Grayson was furious when he read the motion. He scheduled an emergency hearing, determined to put an end to what he called a blatant disregard for legal neutrality in his court. The courtroom was even more crowded than before. News cameras lined the back, and every major legal analyst in the country had a front row seat. Bondi sat confidently at the defendant's table, flanked by Jonathan Reeves and her legal team. Across from them, Judge Grayson loomed from the bench, his face an unreadable mask. "Ms. Bondi, you stand by your actions?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. Bondi rose from her seat, her every movement deliberate. "Yes, Your Honor. I prayed. I won't deny it." "And you argue that your prayer was a constitutional right?" Bondi nodded. "Not just mine, Your Honor. Everyone's. If you find me for this, what precedent does that set? Will a juror be penalized for whispering a prayer before giving a verdict? Will a witness be fined for seeking strength before testifying?" This is about more than me. It's about whether we are truly free to believe or whether faith is only permitted when hidden behind closed doors. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Even Judge Grayson hesitated for a fraction of a second before composing himself. Then, in a move that no one expected, he turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I will let you decide. The room fell dead silent. The jury, ordinary men and women from different walks of life, now held the power to determine whether Pam Bondi's prayer was an act of defiance or a constitutional right. Bondi met their eyes one by one, knowing that her fate, and perhaps the fate of religious expression in America, rested in their hands. The 12 jurors sat in silence, their faces a mix of tension and uncertainty. They had been prepared to rule on Nathan Hollis' corruption charges, not to decide the fate of a legal titan accused of praying in court. But Judge Grayson's ruling had changed everything. Pam Bondi's defense attorney, Jonathan Reeves, stood and walked toward the jury box, his expression calm and measured. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been asked to determine whether my client, Ms. Bondi, committed an act of contempt by whispering a prayer in this courtroom. But before you decide, I want to ask you something. He paused, letting his words sink in. How many of you have ever said a quiet prayer in a moment of fear, doubt, or hope? A few jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some glanced at one another while others avoided eye contact altogether. One woman, a retired schoolteacher, nodded slightly. Ms. Bondi didn't disrupt these proceedings. She didn't preach. She didn't force her beliefs on anyone. She simply bowed her head and sought strength in her faith, something millions of Americans do every day. Reeves turned to face Judge Grayson. Your Honor, the law is clear that personal faith cannot be penalized in the absence of disruption. Ms. Bondi's prayer did not alter the trial, did not prejudice the jury, and did not interfere with court procedures. Punishing her for her faith is an attack on religious liberty itself. Judge Grayson's jaw tightened. He gestured toward the prosecution's table. Mr. Davis, you may present your argument. The prosecuting attorney, Mark Davis, a sharp, methodical man, adjusted his glasses and stood. He strode toward the jury with calculated precision. Let's be clear, he began. This case is not about faith. It is about maintaining order in a court of law. The moment we allow personal beliefs to dictate what is and isn't acceptable in a courtroom, we open the floodgates to chaos. He turned to Pam Bondi. Ms. Bondi is a respected legal professional. She understands the importance of courtroom decorum. If we excuse her actions, what stops a defendant from kneeling in prayer during testimony? What stops a lawyer from citing scripture instead of legal precedent? Davis turned back to the jury, his voice unwavering. This isn't persecution. This is about the integrity of our legal system. Pam Bondi watched as the jurors absorbed every word. Some nodded in agreement, others remained stone-faced. This was a battle of principles and no one could predict how it would end. The unexpected witness. As the arguments concluded, Judge Grayson was about to dismiss the court when a hand shot up from the defendant's side. Your Honor, I would like to testify. Every head turned. It was Nathan Hollis. The man at the center of the original corruption trial, the man Bondi had been working to prosecute, was now offering to testify in her defense. Judge Grayson's eyes narrowed. Mr. Hollis, you are currently under trial. Why would you testify? Hollis adjusted his tie and leaned forward. Because I was there. I saw what happened. And I think the jury deserves to hear my side of it. Bondi's attorney hesitated, then nodded. We welcome his testimony, Your Honor. Judge Grayson sighed. Very well. But tread carefully, Mr. Hollis. I will not tolerate theatrics. Hollis smirked slightly, then turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not a good man. The courtroom fell silent. I have been accused of crimes I may or may not have committed. But I will tell you this, what Pam Bondi did that day. That was not a crime. He folded his hands on the stand. When she bowed her head, I was watching her. I knew she wasn't just thinking about this case, she was thinking about the truth. About justice. And frankly, it scared me. Because for the first time, I realized that she wasn't just fighting for a legal victory. She was fighting for something much bigger than that. Hollis leaned back. So, if you want my opinion, go ahead and find me guilty if the evidence is there. But don't punish that woman for having the courage to believe in something. A stunned hush fell over the room. The jury exchanged looks, shaken by the unexpected testimony. Even Judge Grayson seemed momentarily lost for words. Pam Bondi exhaled slowly. She had spent her career fighting against men like Nathan Hollis. And yet, in this moment, he had become her most unlikely ally. The jury was sent to deliberate. Outside the courthouse, the world waited. News crews had set up live broadcasts, and social media was on fire with debates over the case. #StandWithPam was trending on Twitter. while legal analysts on television clashed over the implications of the ruling. Some claimed that allowing Bondi to pray without consequence would set a dangerous precedent, while others argued that punishing her would amount to religious persecution. Inside a small deliberation room, the 12 jurors sat in a tense circle. The foreman, a middle-aged Navy veteran named Robert Kinsey, cleared his throat. "All right, folks, let's get down to it." A young woman in a business suit, Samantha Wells, was the first to speak. "This is ridiculous." It was a silent prayer. She didn't disrupt anything. "Why are we even debating this?" An older man, Leonard Hughes, frowned. "I get what you're saying, but if we rule in her favor, what happens next? What if another lawyer starts reciting Bible verses in open court? Or a defendant starts chanting prayers during sentencing?" A woman in her late 60s, Margaret Olson, raised a hand. But this wasn't a performance. She didn't do it for attention. She did it for herself. And if we punish her for that, aren't we punishing faith itself? The room grew quiet. Finally, Robert Kinsey sighed. "Let's take a vote." Hands slowly rose, one by one, until the decision was clear. The verdict. The jury returned to the courtroom, their faces unreadable. The tension was palpable. Pam Bondi sat with her hands folded, her heart pounding but her face calm. Judge Grayson turned to the jury. "Mr. Kinsey, has the jury reached a decision?" Kinsey stood. "We have, Your Honor." The room held its breath. "We, the jury, find that Pam Bondi is not guilty of contempt of court." Collective gasp filled the courtroom. The verdict had been reached, a ruling that would send shockwaves across the legal system. Judge Grayson's expression hardened. He was clearly displeased, but bound by the jury's decision. With a sharp nod, he struck his gavel. "The defendant is cleared of contempt charges. Court is adjourned." A nation reacts. The moment Bondi stepped outside, she was met with a massive crowd. Supporters cheered, waving American flags, while reporters shoved microphones in her face. "Ms. Bondi, what does this ruling mean for religious freedom? Do you feel vindicated? Is this the start of a bigger legal battle?" Bondi smiled, choosing her words carefully. "This case was never about me. It was about the freedom of every American to believe in something greater than themselves. Today, the jury didn't just defend my rights, they defended all of ours." Across the street, Judge Grayson exited through a side door, avoiding the media frenzy. He walked to his car, his face set in stone. He had lost, but he was far from done. Because if he had his way, this fight was only beginning. Pam Bondi sat in the back of a black SUV, watching the crowds through tinted windows. People were celebrating in the streets. Some carried signs reading "Faith won today," while others clutched copies of the Constitution, waving them high. Jonathan Reeves, her attorney, turned to her. "You did it, Pam." Bondi shook her head. "We did it. But this isn't over." Reeves frowned. "What do you mean?" Pam sighed. "Judge Grayson isn't going to let this go. He wanted to make an example out of me. And losing in his own courtroom? That's something a man like him won't forget." Reeves ran a hand through his hair. "He can't appeal." The jury spoke. Pam leaned back in her seat. "Maybe not legally, but men like him always find another way." Judge Grayson's next move. At that very moment, Judge Malcolm Grayson was sitting in his private chambers, gripping his pen so tightly his knuckles were white. He had lost, and he hated losing. His clerk, Ethan Marsh, knocked hesitantly before entering. "Sir, the media is all over this. The legal community is split down the middle." Grayson exhaled sharply. "What are they saying?" Marsh hesitated. "Some say you overstepped, that you tried to punish someone for their beliefs. Others say Bondi got away with undermining judicial authority." Grayson scoffed. "She didn't undermine the court. She mocked it." Marsh shifted uncomfortably. "So, what's next?" Grayson leaned forward, eyes burning with determination. "We wait. Bondi isn't done making waves, and when she does, I'll be ready." A sudden offer. 2 weeks later, Pam Bondi received an unexpected call from a high-ranking senator in Washington. "Pam, I've been watching your case closely. The country has been watching. We need people like you to stand for what's right." Pam listened, intrigued. "What are you asking, Senator?" There was a pause. Then, the voice on the other end said, "How would you feel about a seat on the Supreme Court?" Pam's breath caught. The Supreme Court? This case had started as a fight for personal faith, but now it had catapulted her into a national figure for religious rights. Pam Bondi looked out her window over the vast Washington skyline. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning.